So pin the back to the front like so, and this will be a little bit longer, but we will, after we sew it, the seams, we will adjust it and cut it and just kind of even it out so that it makes a nice curve from the front to the back. So see, that's about an inch different here. Pin the other side too. Now you have this pinned together on each side. Do the same thing with these pieces. Sew where the pins are for both of those. Sew a 1-inch line down all 4 seams, and be sure to back tack at the ends of the fabric. So next, iron open the seams. You always want to do this with seams, and do that on all of them. So right here, it is uneven where the front meets the back. And you just want to straighten it out and eyeball it. So you could use a curved ruler if you have one, like this one, and you could do something like this shape just to round it out if you do have one. Or just eyeball it and cut it out with scissors and you'll be fine. I'm just going to eyeball it like so and smooth out this part a little bit. There's a really nice seam right there, like so. So do that on all of the sides. Now this one is done nicely. This is the area that'll go under your armpit, right here. So now you have the front and the back. And at this point, I can't decide if I should use this for the straps or not. I'll teach you how to do straps. So we'll do reversible straps, so it's different on each side. Find a long piece of fabric. Hopefully you have, and if not, use another fabric, use lace, use a plain fabric, whatever you like. Sorry, I forgot to record this part, but to measure your strap, just go over your shoulder from the front top to the back of where you want your bustier, and then you'll get the measurement. So my measurement is 22 inches, so it'll be a 1/2 inch seam allowance on this side and this side, so it's 2 inches total, and a 1/2 inch seam allowance there and there, so it's 23 instead of 22. I'm deciding to draw on here to show you that you can draw on the white side too if you like, if it's easier for you to see or something. Lay the strap on the rest of your fabric and then you can pin it and trace it really carefully for the other strap. And then make the exact same ones out of polka dot also. And the straps you do have to be pretty careful with because they're smaller. When you fold it out again, you want it to line flat. You want the seam to be flat and not show the other fabric. So you do want to be somewhat careful. So put the right sides together again and match it up pretty well. So you match it there to there. So pin along both sides and leave the parts because you'll just be putting that inside a seam, so it won't matter. And then you'll want to sew a 1/2 inch down here and here, and not on the end. Sew a 1/2 inch down here. And back tack. Take out your pins. I think I forgot to say that last time. So now that you have these, you can trim off the seam allowance. I already did one side. Now it's about a 1/4 inch here and a 1/2 inch here still. So trim off about this much. This will just help you with turning right side out these straps. I forgot to mention that you'll need a medium or large safety pin. You can put it in here like so, and then push it down inside. Start to bunch it up and push the safety pin. The safety pin's right here, push it through, and start to pull off the other side to make room for new fabric to gather onto the safety pin. this is like giving birth to a child. Push, push, push. Breathe. And you pull it. The new fabric starts to come through. Look how cool that is. Pull it right side out, like so. And you'll want to iron these down. So what you can do now is actually gently iron it open, like this. So you want to iron the seam inside kind of open, but lightly. You don't want to have a crease on the sides. And then it should be able to lay flat more easily. And it's not a big deal if it shows, because it looks kind of like part of the flower pattern, but you don't really want, like this happening. Depends how much you want to fuss with it. And like so. You want to put these right sides together. So this and this go together, and the seams on the outside. Match it up, and then match the other side up. And you can just match it all the way around and pin it. Do the same in the back, and we'll add the straps in before we sew this. Don't sew it yet. It should look like this weird thing. From the middle of the seam, here I'll put it 3 inches in. I'll mark where the edge of 3 inches is. And there's a perfect opening. You can just remove a pin, but I happen to have a perfect opening, so that's great. So what will happen is you'll want to push it all the way through. Now people are probably like, when I first started sewing, I was like, oh, there, you just sew the strap on and leave most of it hanging out of here. But you do not do that. You pull it all the way through. So we can actually flip it around so we can figure out how we want it. So I just asked my mom for advice, and she thinks it's cute to have it be like that and like that. So make sure that when you flip it around, it's whichever way you want the strap to be. You want it to be in pretty much the whole way, since we did an inch seam allowance. What you're going to want to do is kind of like go inside here where the straps are, double checking that they're both the same. And you're going to want to, I'm going to crisscross it and pull it through to the back. So on the inside, it looks like this. Pull it through to here. I'm going to go away 4 inches on the back because I want the front sort of like 50s bandeau style, like how it's, how the straps go really far to the edges of the front of you, but I want the back closer in together. So you want to take this strap in the front and crisscross it over into the back and then push it through where you want it. Flipping it out to the other side definitely helps you see what it will actually look like if you're a little bit confused about what goes on the inside with like the seams and which way things are facing, because they don't look like how they're going to. So all the way around, and remember it's 1 inch seam allowance, and then we'll trim it down. And always be careful to look under and make sure you aren't getting any fabric. And let's trim it down to 1/2 out of the 1 inch. We're going to trim off like this much. So I'm just ironing this open, the seam, like so, and then it'll make it easier to flip around. And you can iron the strap whichever way you want to, but this will just make it easier when we turn it around. So that's what we have, and we are going to iron this down. Now I'm going to take the elastic that I have and go on the back with the right sides together where I have it sewed and pin it. So this is going to be sort of messy, but because there's a lining and elastic doesn't fray and cotton doesn't really fray, this will be fine. This is so that it can be reversible but also stretchy on the inside. And you don't want to pin the elastic over the line you have sewn, just like to it. On the back, you want it flipped out the right way, and you want to just start pinning down from one seam to the other. So since my elastic is a 1/2 inch, I want to make a casing that I can put it in that'll be a little bit bigger, a 1/4 inch more about, so I'm going to do 3/4 inch down from the edge of the top. So start at the seam on the back. and then stop at the seam on the other side. Get a safety pin and go inside your top, and you'll be able to feel a little hole on the edge of where you did your sewing, and you'll be able to push it in, pull it through straight, make sure the elastic goes straight on the back. Pull it so that you have a little bit of a tail with elastic on the end. You want to go in and sew it to the seam. I'm going to sew it to this seam. And just go over it and back tack it a few times. Now the elastic is just basically sewn clean inside there, and it won't move because it's attached to one of the seams. Now we can pull the elastic through. And at this point you might want to try on the back and see how it fits you. Sew the other end of the elastic to the seam. So now the back of your bustier top will be like this. The straps will be crisscrossed, and there'll be ruching look with the elastic, and it'll look really neat and finished. Open up the seam allowance on the back bottom piece. I'm choosing to use this one because it's a little bit stiffer. Measure up 1 inch and pin that around. So this is all pinned up 1 inch. Do the same thing on the bottom back. We put the right sides together for the front bottom, and we're going to actually sew this on the machine. I just like to have the whole thing pinned. So this we can sew on the machine, and you just can't do this all the way around since we have to be able to flip it through that back open part. And you just want to sew from about the seam or maybe a little bit over on the whole front part, so it'll be like partly sticking in, partly sticking out. So right now I'm just sewing from one side to the other as I could, from one side of the seam to the other, and if you can't go all the way because there's so many pins from folding up the back, don't worry about it. So on the back we can sew the casing down. Sew over maybe like 1/4 or 1/8 inch on the part that we made for the casing. So only one side that you picked will have 2 rows of stitching on the bottom. Now we can use this again. In this case I have to go like under the seams to get to the other side. And sew one side of the elastic to the seam again. Before we do anything else, we're going to want to sew down the bottom and the top, because once we ruche it and pull it and make it with the elastic, we're not going to be able to sew that very easily. So sew an 1/8 inch down and match your 2 1 inch turned up pieces together. This is why I made it a bigger casing. Kind of push your elastic up that way. So, and it'll make a really clean finish. Sew it down maybe an 1/8 inch or 1/4 inch. You can pull it tight so it's inside there nicely. You want it to match the top in elasticity. So just open up that little hole and sew it to one of the seams. Sew down a little bit that's open right here. Measure the middle of your top very carefully and then pin a line down the exact center. So then you can put some sideways pins in once you make a straight line down the front. And I'm just going to go ruche it a few times on the machine. So after you sew just a straight line down where you pinned the fabric, you want to back tack and cut off the bottom threads and leave the top thread hanging. You just ruche by pulling one of the threads and then you'll start to gather it, if you see what that looks like. And you can gather it as much as you like depending what kind of shape you want, if you want it more sweetheart, less sweetheart looking. And then you can go in and sew it down a couple times. Follow the stitching line that you have originally so it looks neater. You shouldn't feel any give, it should feel firm once you have sewed it down a few times. This is the end result with how the crop top looks, and basically you can ruche it however much you like. If you try it on and you want it ruched more, you could do that, or less. And I added a flower because I thought it was cute. And it's super summery and wearable, and it's like stretchy and loose and comfortable and great for summer weather. So I hope that this tutorial was helpful for you, and if you have any questions, leave them below. And please like and subscribe and check out my other social media. I'll have links below for that. Thank you. Thanks for watching. Bye.